Hello. Thanks for having me. Thank you for the ETH Belgrade organizers for having me on board. And super excited to be here today to talk about something called the Open Intents Framework. I know it's day 3 of a very long conference, and you guys are probably mentally checked out. So I will try to keep this as high level and as entertaining as possible. And I can guarantee you that this is probably going to be top 5 talks at the conference, because this stuff is just genuinely groundbreaking. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how interesting the Open Intents Framework is. Not sarcasm. So what is the Open Intents Framework? So the Open Intents Framework is basically an open source tooling kit built by a coalition of companies, including Li.Fi, but also Ethereum Foundation, OpenZeppelin, across Hyperlane and others, to basically fix interoperability. And so we're allowing for permissionless cross-chain interoperability between any chains that exist now and are going to exist in the future as well. So basically trying to solve that cold start problem that we're seeing with a lot of new chains, a lot of new rollups in our ecosystem. But before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm even qualified to talk about this stuff right now. So my name's Jim. I'm the head of product at Li.Fi. Some of you guys may know me online as my handle is YourXJim, but please don't call me that out loud. I like to be called Jim. And previously, I was a co-founder of a company called Catalyst, where we built cross-chain bridges. We actually got acquired by Li.Fi earlier this year, and so now I am at Li.Fi. It's still doing cross-chain stuff, because I love it. And then before that, I was a product manager at Aave, where I built a lot of cross-chain stuff at Aave, like portals and Go, and a lot of lens chain kind of POC stuff as well. And so definitely been doing a lot of cross-chain things for the past few years. And I've been in crypto for about 7 years. I started off working at Ripple as a product manager in 2017. And now I'm here not working at Ripple, working in Ethereum or multi-chain. And then lastly in the intros, what is Li.Fi for some of you guys who don't know? Li.Fi is, one, the company I work for, but two, it's a bridge and DEX aggregator, and so all these different tools that you can use to go to different chains and swap to different tokens, we basically aggregate and abstract all of that. And so if you have any token on one chain and you want to go to literally any other token on another chain, you can do that through Li.Fi, through our routing and through our execution engine. And we're pretty legit. We've done over $30 billion of volume to date, so we know what we're talking about. And we're trusted by over 400 customers, and notable apps include things you guys probably already use, like Phantom and MetaMask and Robinhood and all that other good wallet stuff. But that's enough about intros. Let's talk about the good shit. And so what is the problem that we have right now? We have what I call the Interop problem, and it's a problem that I think everyone in crypto is facing, is that we have a lot of chains. Here are a subsection of them. It's not even all of them. I think there are over 350 chains on CoinGecko. And there are more chains launching each week. We have things like roll-up as a service infrastructures like Caldera and Conduit, where you could literally spin up a new chain, a new roll-up, just like a snap, right? Literally, I could do it right now if I had my computer and they allowed me to screen share. And so if there are all these new chains launching each week, and all these new app chains and app rollups and everything that everyone in this conference has been talking about, really excited about, keep on coming, and there's more on the horizon, we got a problem in our hands, right, guys? We have these new chains. It's super easy to make a new chain. What happens afterwards? What are you going to do? You're just going to hang out on your own little chain? No, obviously, you want to have a connected economy, right? You want to be talking to all the other chains that you want to do business with. You want to go to Base. You want to go to Arbitrum, Optimism. You even want to go beyond that, right? You want to go to Solana, you want to go to the Cosmos ecosystem, you want to go move chains. I've made my points. But the issue is that there's no easy way to connect them together. There's no easy way to do bridging, because bridging is really, really hard. And not only is it really hard, but it's also a terrible user experience to have different wallets with different assets, trying to move between different chains. And it's just really painful. And the user sees that, and I think that's a huge blocker for mainstream adoption for crypto. And if we want to be anything to anyone as an industry and taken seriously, we need to solve this interop problem. And so the current solution right now, which is okay, is something called intents. Raise your hand if you know what intents are. Okay, that's pretty good. That's more than I thought, outside of the little interop nerd bubble that I find myself in. But as a primer for folks that don't know what intents are basically, well, there are many things, but in the context of cross-chain, intents are basically a way for users to express what they want to do on different chains and basically offload the responsibility of that actual pathfinding and execution to a third party that we typically call a solver. And so here you can see that the origin chain is basically where the user finds themselves. They have some assets here. They put it into escrow, so just a standard smart contract with maybe a time lock and some verification calls. And then you have this entity here called a solver that basically does all the magic, right? And so what a solver does, very simplistically, is that they have some assets on the chain that the user wants to go to, and they basically just give it to the user. Obviously, not for free. They're going to be charging a little bit of money for that. But what's really cool about using intents is that now there's basically all these sophisticated actors like solvers who can take assets on one chain from a user and basically go to any destination chain they want, right? Not necessarily bounded to an n=1 context here, or even n=2. And so that's really helpful because now a user can have USDC on Base, but they can perform actions or they can receive assets on all these other chains, on Ethereum mainnet, on Arbitrum, on Optimism, even on Solana and other ecosystems. And so that's really cool, right? And that's what everyone's been really excited about, and that's what everyone's been cheering about because they think, quote, interop is solved because we basically allow these solvers to just do the interop-y thing for users, right? Wrong. And so there is a problem with intents, unfortunately. And I think the high-level takeaway is that intents are really hard to build. It's a huge barrier to entry to even have intents exist on a certain chain. Obviously, from the diagram before, you could see that you need a solver, right? And solvers are quite sophisticated, and they hold inventory, and they're basically market makers. And so it's not easy to be running a solver. And so you either have two choices in front of you if you're a chain that wants to have interop and have intents. The first one is that you're reliant on BD for integrations. And so basically, if you're a new chain, you have to go to these solvers, and you have to beg them, basically, or give them incentives, give them money, to actually be on these chains, right? And actually hold inventory on these chains and solve routes for their users and everything. And so that is obviously not permissionless. It's a huge barrier. The second thing is that it's really complex to build and maintain your own solver, right? Let's say you don't want to sell your soul to the devil. You actually want to do it yourself. It's really hard. You have to do routing. You have to have inventory. You have to do rebalancing, all these other things. It's really hard. And so what ends up happening is that each team that wants to build their own solver has to do it from scratch, right? There's no framework for how to build a solver. Everyone does it a little bit differently. Every chain is a little bit different. And so it ultimately becomes a really inefficient effort for the ecosystem as a whole. And so we're going to try to eliminate all of that wasted work. And we're going to try to lower the barrier for intents to be able to be built and deployed on all these new chains. And we call that the Open Intents Framework, the OIF. And again, this is a permissionless open source framework for any chain and any builder to deploy intents on their chain and have solvers move money and be aware of these intents between all these different chains. And again, this is not something that we're building alone as LI.FI. That I think defeats the purpose of building open source and building standards. But we're doing this as a coalition in tandem with the Ethereum Foundation and other builders in the space because we really want to fix this because we think it's obviously the biggest problem that we're facing in crypto right now. And so what is the Open Intents Framework? So the Open Intents Framework is basically a collection of modules that allow builders to deploy different pieces of intents and to customize them based on all the little customizations and preferences that they have, right? And the purpose of the open intents framework is that it's full stack, it's end to end. And so there's no piece about intents that isn't covered in the OIF. And so any chain team that has no idea how to do cross-chain at all can just use it off the shelf and be able to have intents from day one upon chain launch. And so these are the 6 components that we basically build for the OIF. And so at the top, we have order flow origination, which is a really fancy word for a UI or a website. But basically, what we do is we allow an open source website that anyone can fork and customize in order to, issue intents and to receive intents. The second thing is intent expression and escrow. I'll talk about that in a second. The third one is an order flow auction. And so after these intents are expressed, basically it needs to go through a mechanism for these intents to be actually bid against by all these solvers. Fourthly, we have something called intent fulfillment. And so that is where solvers who've won the bid for an intent can actually execute it on chain. Fifthly, we have something called cross-chain validation. And so this is where after a solver has fulfilled an intent, they're owed money, right? They need to get money somehow because they basically lent money to the user to perform this action. And so there needs to be a way for them to show proof that they actually did that on the destination chain and then claim the assets on the origin chain. And then lastly, it's something called solver rebalancing. And so ultimately, solvers hold money too, and they need money in different places so that they can fulfill more intents. And so we build tooling that allows them to really easily do that. And so mind you, these 6 pieces are what every solver does, basically, or every intent product does. They have a website, they have intent expression and escrow, they have order flow auction, they have intent fulfillment, blah, 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 but they all build it themselves. And so there's no standards, everything is bespoke, everything is built from scratch, and so obviously you can tell that's really inefficient. And so what we built with the OIF is that we've taken all these 6 pieces and we've basically done 2 things. One is that we've built an open source version for all 6 of these things. And the second thing that we've done is that we've allowed for the modularization of each piece such that there is customization on every level. So if you're a chain or if you're a builder team and you have all these little requirements that your chain has, it has super fast block speed, or you want permission solving with certain market makers, you can do that, right? Like there's no stone that's left unturned. And I'm gonna talk about this more in a second. But basically, what we're trying to do with the OIF is that we're trying to build basically an open source menu of every Interop project. And so this is a research piece that I wrote with our head of research a couple months ago called the intent value chain. Sorry, it's a little small there. But basically, we map out all the different pieces of how intents work. It's basically this thing right here. And we mapped out every project that's involved with it, right? So Across and Layer 0 and Stargate and One Balance, et cetera, they all fit in here. And so we're basically building a framework in which every project can contribute modules, open source modules, to customize anything, right? So you can build an open source UI, and you can fork it, and you can customize how it looks. You can also build a chain abstracted wallet, which I think many teams even at this conference were talking about. And you can plug that right into the open intents framework, right? And so that's pretty standard. There are things that people are doing on the intent expression and escrow side. And so again, this is how a user expresses an intent and how they actually store money on chain such that they can even get authorized to issue an intent, because then a solver knows that they have money and then they can actually fulfill an intent for them. And so things like ERC 7683, raise your hand if you know what ERC 7683 is. All right, no worries. It's basically a standard that Across and Uniswap wrote to standardize intent expression. There's also things called the compact, which is basically another thing. I don't need to belabor the point of all this nerdy stuff. But that's something that we can customize, right? Because when you're an interop project or you're a chain, you actually have a preference between these things once you get down to the nitty-gritty, although it may not seem like it right now, so I apologize. Another thing that we customize, and I kind of touched upon, is order flow auctions. And so you can have a public or private auction. So that means any solver can participate in this order flow, or it means only a permission set of solvers can participate, and there's benefits to them. You can do things like a Dutch auction. You can do things like a first come, first serve, and so basically like a gas war. And there's minute benefits to each of these, but they accumulate over time, and so these are preferences that people have. Intent fulfillment, I think, is a really big piece of the OIF, and so, like I said, it's really hard to build a solver. Everyone builds it from scratch. And so we open sourced a solver implementation that can configure to all these pieces, right? And so the really cool thing now is that anyone could use this off the shelf and just run their own solver, and they don't have to build anything, which is really helpful. Cross-chain validation, typically what happens right now with cross-chain validation is that it's all bespoke. They either use one Oracle, basically, like Chainlink CCIP, or maybe they use Layer 0 or Wormhole, et cetera, et cetera. We have built a framework that allows for any cross-chain validation to happen. And there's actually been some work on the standard side. So there's something called RIP 7755, so Rollup Improvement Proposal 7755. You don't need to know the details of it. There's another one called ERC 7786. It's basically allowing for the aggregation of all these different oracles. There's things called GMPs, General Message Protocols, like Wormhole, like Hyperlane, like Layer 0, that can arbitrarily pass any messages. Again, it doesn't really matter for the OIF. We can do anything, right? And people have an opinion on this because it's a security assumption they need to take on. And then lastly, we have solver rebalancing. And so this is really interesting because a really big barrier to running a solver besides the pure operations of it is actually the money operations of it, right? How do you actually move money to ensure that you have enough money to fulfill these intents on different chains? And so this is where we're working with Everclear in order to do some really interesting netting. And we're also working with other liquidity layers like Nomial and something that we're building in-house as well, and OFTs as well, which is Layer 0's omni-chain fungible token standard. Again, it's a lot of stuff. But basically, the high-level takeaway is that we can fit a lot of stuff in this baby, okay? So I'm very, very excited that there's finally an open source framework that invites all these projects to basically become not competitors, but cooperators in the goal of solving this huge interop problem. And so that's how it works in terms of all the nuts and bolts, kind of. I don't have diagrams. I could have added diagrams, but I can see that my eyes are glazing over, so I totally understand. But if I'm a team or a chain developer, how do I actually use the OIF, right? And so what you can do is you can go to the OIF repo, and you can use our open source deployer to deploy these OIF smart contracts on this new chain that you want intense, right? And so if I build Gym chain and it's a optimistic rollup using Conduit, I can go to the OIF repo and I can basically deploy these open source contracts into my chain. Granted, that's EVM equivalent, but that's where we have larger scope than EVM equivalency in the future. But for now, EVM equivalency is a requirement. The second thing I do is I can customize any component to this, right? And so with the config, I can update certain things. I can use 7683 for my intent expression. I can use a resource lock for escrow. I can have a first come, first serve auction type, Oracle solver design, et cetera, like all the good stuff that I talked about. That's obviously quite detailed. And then I fork the open source solver, and I run it myself, right, using all the straightforward documentation. For folks that don't want to run their own open source solver, we're also in the process of building a solver as a service. And so basically an instance that you spin up and it's run by a third party that can actually run your solver for you. So even less of a barrier to be doing intents on this new chain. And then I fork the open source UI. It's configured in a certain way such that it can detect new intents on new chains. You just need to add the chain ID and the RPC for it. And what's the result? The result is that my new chain, my gym chain, has intents now. And I can connect it to Base or Optimism or Ethereum mainnet or anywhere. And it just works. And that's called solving interop, ladies and gentlemen. And so what does the OIF give us? So the OIF gives us permissionless chain deployment, of course. That is, first and foremost, the most important goal of the OIF. The second thing that it gives us is an off-the-shelf, open-source modular infrastructure such that anyone can use it, they can fork it, they can modify it, and no one's ever building things from scratch. And so kind of just giving to the community and allowing more people to run solvers, allowing more people to run intents, with the hope that they would modify it as well and build new things that we've never seen before. And the last thing, which I think is really beneficial for everyone in the audience, is that we have one UI for all chains. This UI will have every chain, will have every token, and if there are new marginal chains being added, it will automatically add them as well. And so you never need to figure out how you're going to get different assets on different chains to another one, because we have it soon. And so we're solving interop. All these things that we had goals for that Vitalik has written down, we're going to solve them. We're going to solve day one chain support. We're going to do any chain, any VM soon. Again, not a hard requirement right now. Anyone can run a solver. That's obviously a really important goal for the OIF, so I highlighted it. But it's trust minimized, it's open source, it's modular, it's chain abstracted, it's price competitive, it has all assets. These are all things that we're solving with the OIF, and therefore we're going to solve this interop problem. And the best part, and I mention it again and again because it's really important, is that this is not a Li.Fi effort. This is not something that Li.Fi has concocted themselves and thought of. This is something that we're working with in tandem with other folks, because if you're proposing a standard but you're the only company using it, that's not a standard. That's just something that you're using yourself. And so we're working with folks like the Ethereum Foundation, like OpenZeppelin, across Hyperlane, Everclear, OneBalance, just all the logos here. And because we all realize that this is so painful, like genuinely. Like, raise your hand if you think that the current bridging process sucks ass. Okay, like half the room, other half, probably, you guys are loving life with what you got, so more power to you. But I'm one of those folks, and I want to solve it, and that's why I've dedicated a meaningful chunk of my adult life to just trying to solve this problem, Jesus Christ. So you can use the OIF today. It's a real thing. You can go to the OIF GitHub repo. I mean, granted, you have to be somewhat technical. But you can go to the OIF GitHub repo. You can deploy our contracts. And you can start issuing intents. Easy as that. I'm going to share the repo link in a second. And to show you guys that it's real, I'm going to show you guys a demo right now. And I think we have a video that the lovely AV team will pull up. And I can talk more about it. Cool. So, oh god, we're already starting. So basically, this is our UI. It's called lintent.org. And what you could see here, obviously, we're not UX UI designers here, but we can do things to issue an intent. And so here is where you manage your balance that we call the compact. Here is where we're signing for an intent. And so here we want to sell 3 Sepolia USDC, and we want to buy 3 base Sepolia USDC. That's an intent which is signed earlier and was issued down here. And basically, because there's no solvers right now, we're self-solving it. So we filled it, executed a transaction, and now what we're doing here is that we are pasting the transaction hash to validate it. And I think there should be something that pops up here. We'll see. Here we go. So basically, we're validating it. So it's already been filled, and now it's getting validated that it's been filled using something called Polymer, which is one of the oracles that I mentioned earlier. And after it's been validated, we can actually claim the funds that have been deposited on the 3 USDC on Sepolia. So it's a little janky right now, and I had to talk a little bit fast because I recorded it a little fast, so sorry about that. But you can go to it, lintent.org. You can follow these instructions here, and you can do it themselves. You can see that there's intents being issued. And we're going to add more chains. Obviously, we're going to be on mainnet. Obviously, we're going to clean this stuff up. But for the sake of a demo, it's not bad, right? And I do apologize that it's a video that's going really fast. I wasn't allowed to share my screen. Not that I even would have wanted to, because I probably would have messed it up anyway. But that is the video for it. So again, lintent.org, lintent.org, to try it out. Cool. And I think we have a few more slides. Yes, thank you. So I'll wrap up quickly. I know I'm at time. So what's next for the OIF? And so everything I talked about. We're finalizing all the smart contracts. We're finalizing open source solver. We're making the UI a lot better, and then eventually open source. But again, it's real, and you can try it today. So come get involved. If this is something that's really cool for you, scan the QR code. It's going to go to the GitHub repo. You can read the contracts. You can read the solver. You can read the documentation. You can try the UI. It's all there for you. It's a real thing. I'm not just saying marketing stuff. And if this is something that interests you, if you want to get involved in any way, again, it's an open source coalition, DM me. I'm at XeroXGym on Twitter. I'm pretty responsive to DMs. Unless you're trying to scam me, then I will ignore you. But yeah, that is all I got for you guys today. And if you're interested in building the future of interoperability, scan this QR code or come ping me. Cool. Thank you. I think I have time for one question, if the audience has a question. I know it's very dense, so I apologize.
Yeah, hi, hello. I have a question. What is your take on L2 and L3 solution right now? Do we really need them if the main liquidity is concentrated on top 5 blockchains?
So your question's around if we need something like OIF because...
No, if we need like L2, L3 solutions that is launching every day. So all these networks, if we really do need them?
Yeah. So for folks that didn't hear, so the question's around, there are 5 rollups that have, line share of the majority of the liquidity and activity. Do we even need all these new marginal chains? So 2 answers to that. So the first answer is that even if we don't need them, they're still coming, right? And so we have folks that are still building new chains. We even have really interesting chains coming out like Mega ETH and Monad. But there's always the new marginal chain that's happening. There's a ton of new stablecoin rollups that are popping up due to all the stablecoin craze right now. And we need to connect them, right? The reality is that even if all the activity is happening on Base and Arbitrum, et cetera, we still need to connect all these. Otherwise, it's a fragmented experience, right? It's like saying if there were new countries in the world, but no one ever flew to them because no one wants to go there, basically. So we need to at least provide infrastructure for it. And then secondly, I would say that we might need them in the future if we change to an app roll-up paradigm where every app, or at least an ecosystem of apps, are using their own block space. Again, that's obviously been said for the past few years now. We haven't really seen it in fruition outside of Abstract and Sonium and others. But it might happen. But I think that's kind of my view on it. I think I'm at time. Thank you, guys.